She stood there, completely still, as if time itself had stopped. The millionaire's laughter echoed through the elegant room, but Eliza couldn't hear it anymore. All she could focus on was the weathered hands of the man in the worn work clothes, hands that had just solved in 15 minutes what her expensive contractors couldn't fix in 3 months. In that moment, she realized how wrong she had been about everything, and everyone. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us not to judge people by their appearance or circumstances. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful moments that change how we see the world. Michael Reeves clutched his daughter's small hand as they walked through the upscale neighborhood, feeling the weight of the toolbox in his other hand. At 34, his face already showed lines of worry that belonged to someone much older. The past 3 years as a single father had aged him, each day a battle to provide for 8-year-old Lily after her mother abandoned them, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. "Are you sure this is the right house, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice small as she gazed up at the imposing mansion with its manicured lawn and fountain. Michael checked the address on his phone again and nodded. "This is it, sweetheart. Remember what I told you? We never judge a book by its cover. Rich or poor, everyone's pipes leak the same way." He'd been working as a handyman since losing his engineering job when his company downsized. The irony wasn't lost on him, a man with a master's degree in mechanical engineering now fixing toilets and hanging shelves to make ends meet. But pride wouldn't put food on the table or pay for Lily's asthma medication. When they rang the doorbell, a woman in her early 40s answered. Eliza Harrington wore designer clothes that probably cost more than Michael's monthly rent, her dark hair styled perfectly, diamond earrings catching the light. Behind her stood a man in an expensive suit, his Rolex visible as he checked the time with obvious impatience. "You must be the handyman," Eliza said, her tone polite but distant. "Please come in. The kitchen sink has been leaking for months. I've had 3 different contractors look at it, and none could fix it properly. My friend Richard here thinks I should just renovate the entire kitchen." Richard smirked, eyeing Michael's worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "Eliza, darling, I don't think another handyman is the solution. My company could have a team here next week to start a complete overhaul. Why waste time on temporary fixes?" Michael felt Lily squeeze his hand tighter. He'd taught her to be proud of honest work, but moments like these tested his own resolve. "I understand your concern, sir, but sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. May I take a look?" Eliza led them to the kitchen, a sprawling space with marble countertops and high-end appliances. The sink area was partially dismantled, evidence of previous failed repair attempts. "My daughter will just sit quietly over there, if that's okay," Michael said, gesturing to a corner of the kitchen. Lily obediently took her backpack to the spot, pulling out a worn book. Richard leaned against the counter, checking emails on his phone. 15 minutes, then I need to head out. We have that charity gala tonight, Eliza." Michael knelt down to examine the sink, immediately spotting the issue that the expensive contractors had missed. The problem isn't the pipes themselves. It's the water pressure regulator. The previous repairs were addressing symptoms, not the cause. Richard laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "That's what the last guy said too. Charged Eliza $2,000 and the sink was leaking again 3 days later." "I can fix this in 15 minutes, Michael said quietly. Richard's laughter grew louder. 15 minutes? The last team was here for 6 hours. Eliza, this is exactly why I keep telling you to stop hiring these discount handymen and let my company handle it properly." But Eliza wasn't laughing. Something in Michael's confident yet humble demeanor made her pause. She was watching him intently, noticing how his eyes had carefully assessed the entire plumbing system in moments, how his hands moved with precision as he examined the connections. "Let him try, Richard," she said firmly. Michael worked methodically, aware of the millionaire's skeptical gaze. From his toolbox, he pulled out specialized tools that surprised Eliza, these weren't the basic wrenches and pliers of an amateur. His movements were efficient, practiced, and precise. As he worked, Lily coughed from her corner, a harsh sound that made Michael glance up with concern. "Is your daughter all right?" Eliza asked, noticing the worry in Michael's eyes. "She has asthma. The medication helps, but some days are harder than others." He didn't elaborate on how he'd been rationing her medication because the insurance copay had increased again. 14 minutes later, Michael stood up and turned on the faucet. Water flowed perfectly, with no leaks or unusual sounds. The pressure regulator was faulty, causing too much pressure in the line. That's why the connections kept failing. "I've replaced it and reinforced the connections. It won't leak again." Richard stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. The last contractor said it would require replacing all the pipes under the sink." "Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one," Michael repeated, washing his hands. "I'll charge you for 1 hour of labor and the parts. That's $85 total." Eliza froze. The woman who had spent thousands on failed repairs was staring at Michael as if seeing him for the first time. How did you know exactly what was wrong?" Michael shrugged. "Before I was a handyman, I was a mechanical engineer specializing in fluid dynamics. I designed water systems for buildings much larger than this one." The revelation hung in the air. Richard's smug expression faltered, while Eliza's eyes widened with realization. "Why are you working as a handyman then?" she asked softly. Michael glanced at Lily, who was still reading quietly. "Life happens. My company downsized 3 years ago, right after my wife left. With a young daughter to raise alone and the economy what it is, you do what you have to do." Eliza's gaze moved between father and daughter, noticing details she'd overlooked before, the careful patches on Lily's backpack, the way Michael's toolbox was meticulously organized despite being old and worn, how despite their circumstances, both were clean, dignified, and carried themselves with quiet pride. "Richard, I need to speak with Mr. Reeves privately," Eliza said suddenly. "Would you mind checking on the caterers for tonight? They should be arriving soon." Richard looked surprised but nodded, leaving with one last skeptical glance at the sink. When he was gone, Eliza sat down at her kitchen island and gestured for Michael to join her. "Mr. Reeves, I run a foundation that supports education and career development. We also have a division that invests in small businesses. I'd like to hear more about your background." Michael hesitated, glancing at Lily. "I appreciate the interest, Ms. Harrington, but I should get my daughter home for her medication." "Of course," Eliza said, then paused. "Actually, I have a proposal. I've been looking for someone to oversee the technical aspects of several community projects my foundation is funding: water systems for underserved neighborhoods, sustainable infrastructure. It requires someone who understands both the engineering and the practical implementation." Michael's expression remained guarded. "I'm not looking for charity, Ms. Harrington." "This isn't charity," Eliza replied firmly. "This is me recognizing talent and experience when I see it. The position pays $120,000 annually with full benefits, including excellent health insurance. I've had 3 candidates with impressive resumes, but none with your practical knowledge. Sometimes the best engineers are the ones who understand how things actually work in the real world, not just in theory." Michael stood silent, processing her words. Lily looked up from her book, sensing something important was happening. "Why would you offer this to someone you just met?" he finally asked. Eliza smiled. "Because in 15 minutes, you showed me more competence, honesty, and dignity than most people I meet in a year. You didn't try to upsell me or complicate the problem. You saw what needed fixing and you fixed it." She paused. "And because 3 years ago, I was on the other side of this story. Before I inherited my late husband's fortune, I was a single mother working 3 jobs. Someone took a chance on me once. I believe in paying that forward. For the first time since she'd opened the door, Michael's guarded expression softened. I would need to think about it. Of course, Eliza said, writing her personal number on a business card. Call me tomorrow. And Mr. Reeves? I'm still paying you for fixing my sink today. As Michael and Lily walked down the driveway, the little girl looked up at her father. Is something good happening, Daddy? Michael squeezed her hand, feeling a weight lifting from his shoulders for the first time in years. I think so, sweetheart. I think so. 6 months later, Eliza stood at the podium at the grand opening of the community center her foundation had built in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. Beside her stood Michael, now the foundation's director of sustainable infrastructure, looking almost unrecognizable in a crisp button-down shirt, his face relaxed and confident. When I met Michael Reeves, Eliza told the crowd, he promised to fix my sink in 15 minutes. My wealthy friend laughed at him. But I saw something that day that changed my perspective forever. I saw a man who had every reason to be bitter but chose dignity instead. A father who showed his daughter that honest work is never something to be ashamed of. An engineer who remembered that the purpose of his skills was to solve real problems for real people. In the front row, Lily sat proudly watching her father, her breathing easy and strong thanks to the medical care she now received. Beside her sat Richard, whose initial skepticism had transformed into respect after working with Michael on several foundation projects. The true measure of a person isn't found in their circumstances, Eliza continued. It's found in how they handle those circumstances. Michael taught me that sometimes the solutions to our biggest problems aren't complicated or expensive. Sometimes they just require someone who sees past the surface to what's really broken. After the ceremony, as they watched children playing in the new community center playground, Michael turned to Eliza. You know, I never thanked you properly. For what? She asked. Hiring the most qualified person for the job. Michael smiled. For seeing me when I was invisible to most people. For reminding me who I really was when I'd started to forget. Eliza shook her head. You were never invisible, Michael. Some of us just weren't looking properly. She watched as Lily ran across the playground, laughing with new friends. You know what the real miracle is? Not that you fixed my sink in 15 minutes. It's that in those same 15 minutes, you fixed something in me that had been broken for much longer. As the sun set over the community center that would change thousands of lives, 3 people who had once been strangers stood together, a reminder that sometimes our greatest transformations begin in the moments when we're brave enough to see beyond appearances, to recognize the dignity in others, and to believe that every person deserves the chance to rise above their circumstances. The millionaire had laughed, the woman had frozen, but in the end, it was the poor single dad who had taught them both what true wealth really means.